Good morning, everyone. So I'm sorry? Coffees? There's another new coffee. Excellent. So there's plenty of coffee up there. Feel free to grab some if you need it. I need more, obviously. My name is Michael Roventine. I am Director of Smbmsp. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. A couple announcements, and then we will get right to Maggie's presentation. We appreciate having you here this morning. Hashtag, all of this information's been up there. None of this is going to be shocking news to anybody, but hashtag, tag us this morning if you like. I want to give just a quick nod to our sponsors. Luther Automobile Dealerships, please give them a warm round of applause. And Stanley's Northeast Barroom, they are our bacon sponsor. Give them a round of applause as well. As well as new, Skelly Video Productions, Sterling Cross Group, Make It MSP, and Muddy Paws Cheesecake. These sponsors, yes, please, if you feel free to clap. These sponsors basically make it possible for us to keep ticket prices low, for us to keep getting great topics in here, and keep this going. So if you see them around, thank them. If you see them online, thank them. If you want to give them a shout out, that would be wonderful. We are going to be streaming very shortly here, I am assured, and you can check our Twitter for the link to Facebook. So how fun is that? Show of hands, who's here for the first time? Wonderful. Welcome. We hope it's not your last. We have been doing this, connecting people and ideas over coffee and bacon since 2008, and we look forward to doing that going forward. So you can go to our website, smbmsp.org, and sign up for email updates on upcoming events and find out more, and we'd love to have you back and hear what you think. Quick upcoming dates right here, both in this space. Next month, both of these are Thursdays. We're on Thursdays now for the duration of the spring and summer, and hopefully the weather will eventually cooperate with us. May 30th, social media case studies, and the June 27th, conversation with Greg Swan from Fallon, their Director of Digital, Social, and Innovation. So we'll have registration and more information about both of these in the next week or so online. So we hope to see you at these events. All right, so Maggie LaMaack is going to join us here in a moment. Let's get your bona fides up here, Maggie, while we get your computer set up. Now we will need you to log in, please. Thank you. So Maggie is the account director at Fast Horse. She leads the influencer, experimental, and media relations campaigns across a number of General Mills brands while overseeing influencer programs and processes across the agency. She's recognized as one of AdFed's 32 under 32. She's named 2015 Young Professional of the Year by MNPRSA, and she has broad understanding of the communications world, loves to find new ways to reach and influence audiences, hopefully like you. So please give Maggie a warm round of applause. Is that on? There you go.
Hello. Hi. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, cool. I think I have the wrong clicker.
Yep.
Okay.
You have mine. Sorry.
Oh.
We had this working. Here.
Oh. Oops.
Yes. Okay, try it again. There you
Hi. Woo. Technical difficulties. All right. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Maggie. I am an account director at Fast Horse, which is, I believe, just that way, if I got my directions correct. And I primarily focus on influencer marketing, but I also do some general account management across a number of brands. Right now I work on the General Mills account, where I do a lot of yogurt stuff, which is very exciting. My lovely clients are sitting right there. And I also work right now across Dos Equis and Heineken, running a bunch of fun influencer and experiential stuff there. So today we are going to talk about something. There. Oh, I will tell you a little bit about how I sort of ended up doing this influencer thing. So this kind of all started for me in like 2008-ish, where I got a Twitter account, and it basically sort of changed my life from there. I met a bunch of people through Twitter in Minneapolis, which that's kind of how I got introduced to this program as well. But I actually ended up meeting my fiance, most of my friends, and I met someone named Sydney Strawman, who used to work at Fast Horse. And that's how I ended up at Fast Horse doing influencer stuff. So she kind of brought me into Fast Horse. She taught me a lot about influencer marketing. I hadn't done it a whole lot before then. And the rest is sort of history. So I've been doing influencer campaigns at Fast Horse for about 4 years now. And the clicker is having issues. Okay. That's here, I can just go from there if that.
Okay, see if that one works.
No, that's okay. There's a lot of, oh wait. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Hopefully this works now. Otherwise, I will run it manually. But today, I'm kind of hoping to talk through basically just a full run-through of what an influencer campaign looks like from beginning to end. I have some small pieces of work in here, but it won't really focus on case studies. I'm really going to talk about the process and how you can find influencers, how you contract influencers, and some tips and tricks I have learned along the way. Here, can I just put it up there? Okay. There's a lot of clicking is the only thing. Okay. The cord very
It's not going to let you.
Okay.
It's not going to let you.
Bring this over here. Okay, this will work. All right.
Sorry, Maggie.
No, that's okay.
Let's give Maggie a big hand for being
All right, so what is influencer marketing? I think you have all seen, but a lot of people think influencer marketing is this. Basically, Kylie Jenner holding up a fit tea package and telling you that this is what she eats every day to get that banging body of hers. But that is not exactly what I like to think of when I think of influencer marketing. And so we'll start at the beginning here. We, this is kind of another picture people see where it's a lot of, models, people who are just wearing clothes, but I think influencers can really showcase a lot more than just fashion. So when a client comes to you looking for influencer marketing, I like to start, or most people like to start with a brief. So usually it starts with, who are we talking to, right? Your client comes to you and they're trying to sell a product, and the first question is, who is your audience? Sometimes that's very specific, but you get a lot of this. Some brands are definitely have a lot more consumer information than others, but generally when a brand comes to you looking for influencer marketing, they're basically trying to reach a younger audience than just what they're getting through paid advertising, what they're getting through even social advertising. It's basically, we're trying to reach a new group of people, whether that's teens or even, people into their 20s and 30s. And so say, for the purposes of this little short case study here, I'll be talking about, say this is a brand that is a sparkling water. And so, this is kind of a new product that's out. They're trying to reach younger people, and this is basically what you get for a brief. So kind of my next step there is what types of people would use this product. And so it's easy to say, we're just trying to reach young people. It can be anyone from 25 to 40, and it's basically just anyone who drinks a soda or something like that. So I try to start to compartmentalize the types of people that I could see using this product. And so for something like a sparkling water, I think a foodie is a good group of people. So people who like to go to restaurants, people who like to cook, people who are just interested in food in general, but maybe don't want to be, consuming calories all of the time. I also see people who are active or health conscious. People who are watching what they eat, are exercising, want a beverage that is going to be good for them and that they can enjoy throughout the day. Sports fitness. So I see this as, different than an active health conscious audience, just because a sport fitness audience is maybe someone that's a little bit more intense. It's an athlete. It's people who are very into certain types of exercise, whereas, a health conscious audience could just be, anyone that's interested in watching their diet. Another group of people I could see here is high achievers or work-centric people who are at work all day long and want, something that they can drink during their work day without worrying about calories or anything like that. And then young parents, people who need, a beverage that is easy to just grab, walk out the door, something that, is simple and easy and they feel good about having it in their fridge for their family. So already we've gone from, a huge range of people to 5 different categories that, it makes sense that this beverage could be consumed by. And so what I like to do next is we get these categories and then you can put those in front of the client. So, you can bring this to the client, give some examples of the types of influencers you would be looking at, and then they can react to that. It makes it a lot easier just for you to kind of understand what you're looking for and really to tighten that range of people that we're going after. So as soon as you kind of know the types of person that you're looking for, you can try to figure out if you're trying to reach a more localized or more nationalized audience. And this is a super important part of what you're trying to figure out. So say you're trying to reach a Minneapolis audience. Someone like a Tom Horgan is going to have a ton of followers in the Minneapolis area, whereas a national influencer might have some people in Minneapolis, but they're probably going to be less influential in this community. So while it could be awesome to reach, 1 million followers, how many of those followers are actually engaged in the city that you're trying to reach? Whereas, if you're trying to go after someone like Tom Horgan, who is like a media person, so he's less of an influencer, but he is definitely a local influencer, you're going to have a very engaged audience in the specific area you're looking for. Another really good example of local influencers is people who post about food in their cities. So if you're talking about somewhere like Austin, Texas, there's all kinds of accounts that are like ATX foodies or, restaurants and ATX. And those are channels that people are going to follow through just like that community versus, people who are just looking for, national products or inspiration on, clothing or food. Whereas if you're trying to reach a more national audience, it might make sense to, find a big national influencer like an Ojoy, for example. So, in the case of this sparkling beverage, she's someone that has young kids, she owns a business, so she kind of hits two of those categories that we were originally talking about. And she just fits that national mold a little bit better. So once you start to know what audiences you're starting to reach, you can really start to determine where you want to focus your energy and where you want to focus your dollars. And then you also need to know what the KPIs are for the client. So is your client looking to create awareness around a product? Are they looking to just, get the product in front of as many eyes as possible? And actually last night I was writing this and realized that I didn't know what KPIs meant. Which is like a completely ridiculous thing, but it's just something that gets thrown around so much and you know what it means, so you never think about it. So KPIs means key performance indicators, and I now know that because of all of you. So KPIs could be anything like we want this many impressions, we want, engagement that has sentiment like this. And I'll talk a little bit more about KPIs later and the types of KPIs you should be setting. But I will say it's tricky in this world. There's not a ton to go on right now, but there's definitely some ways that you can show value to your clients and make sure that what you're creating has value to them. And then finally, what is the budget? And that is probably the most important thing that you need to know. So the nice thing about influencer marketing is it can be extremely scalable. You can spend $1 million on influencers. You can also spend $15,000 on influencers. It just depends on the type of person you're looking for. If you're trying to find local people and they have smaller audiences, they can still be extremely engaged audiences, even if they have something like 3,000 followers. But if you're trying to find national influencers with millions and millions of followers, that's going to be a lot more expensive. So it just depends on what you're looking for and what your KPIs are, and you can kind of go from there. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I don't need to talk at you for an hour and a half. All right, so you've narrowed down your list of influencers. You know what you're looking for. Oh. What do I look for in follower count just to know we get the reach? Yep, it just depends on what impressions goal you're looking for. Somebody with 3,000 followers in Minneapolis can be extremely influential. Look at someone like Sarah Edwards or something. She has probably maybe 8,000 or 10,000 followers, but almost every person that follows her lives in Minneapolis and knows who she is. So if you're trying to reach a local audience, that's the metric you need to go with. In terms of knowing the reach and impressions, I think normally you can gauge that if you post an in-feed Instagram post, about 20% of their audience is going to see it. So that's kind of a good metric to go off of if you, when you're looking for people. Stories are a lot worse, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But another good way to know is, if you're creating this content, you might as well be putting paid behind it as well. So that's another way to reach, a super targeted audience in addition to just what goes in their feed. Okay, so you have narrowed down your influencers and you now need to find actual people. So how do you find an influencer? One really good way is to look for people's boyfriends that are acting ridiculous and taking pictures of them. But if that, doesn't help you out, you can sort of start to look from a category perspective. So there are so many different kinds of influencers out there, from the types of influencers you think of a lot, the like home, lifestyle, DIY type of people, to less common ones. Like there's tech B2B influencers, there's all kinds of like travel influencers, hiking influencers, climbing influencers, mountain biking influencers, like the list goes on and on and on. So I guarantee if you're looking for something, you will be able to find them. So a few ways that I try to find influencers. So one really easy way is to look at hashtags. So if you are looking for someone in Minneapolis, literally all you have to do is put hashtag Minneapolis in your search bar or hashtag MPLS, and you're going to get a ton of like tags of people from Minneapolis, the top of which are probably going to be the most followed people and the most engaged with photos. So you can kind of just start to go down that list. You're trying to look for someone in a specific community or that likes a specific topic, and you have just a wealth of information right there. Another way that we use at Fast Horse is we have a tool called Creator IQ. And that's the top thing up there where we can search. I think they have more than 3 million people on the app that have followings over, 2,000 or 3,000. The app or the program is not perfect by any means, and it's slightly expensive, but it can be a really good way for us to sort of search and narrow down by things like age, audience information, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, the biggest way I find influencers is by Googling things like biggest Denver Instagrammers. There are so many lists out there of, places like local magazines like a Minnesota Monthly or a City Pages, and they are constantly doing lists of people in the communities that are big, have interesting followings, and are highly followed in your city. For national influencers, it's the exact same thing. Go to Pop Sugar and there's like 75 lists of the top beauty influencers, the top fashion influencers, and it's really just playing around on the internet trying to find people who feel right for your brand. And then one really awesome trick I have found is just looking on Instagram at people you already like. So say Sophia Rowe here is someone you have found for your brand, and she's perfect. She's exactly what you were looking for, and you want 5 more people just like her. If you click the little down arrow there, you're going to get a list of other influencers that are exactly like her, and it is extremely helpful. You can basically just scroll through these, and it's going to be a wealth of people who feel super on brand, are very similar to the influencer you just found. So that is the sort of manual part of the search, but I will say that influencer searching is also an art. And this lovely article ran, I believe, yesterday in The Atlantic. It basically said that the pretty Instagram aesthetic is over, and I must agree. A lot of people talk about influencer marketing as a house of cards that's about to topple over, and I would half agree with that. There are so many influencers out there now, and they all look exactly the same. It's just feed after feed of pretty girls holding up products who, have a very specific aesthetic on their channel, and those are the people that I think will not be sticking around. Right now, when I'm looking for influencers, the number one thing that I look for is a personality or something special about them. I was listening to the Second Life podcast, which if you guys do not listen to, it is an amazing thing to listen to. But Sophia Rowe was on there, and she was talking, she's an influencer that does like food, like natural beauty type of stuff. And she was talking about working with brands. And so one thing that she said that I found really interesting was she said, find your why. Everything I do has to be that, or I say no. That is the type of influencer you want to work with. You want to work with influencers that say no a lot, because that means that when they work with your brand, they're saying yes, and they feel like it's a very, very authentic, real partnership that their followers will really like. And yeah, just on that point, I think the way I evaluate influencers now, I'm doing a Heineken campaign right now, and we're working with 50 different people, which is an insane amount of people. But the bar that I worked towards when I was looking for these people, and my coworkers were looking for these people, was I told them, would you want to hang out with these people in a bar? And that's like something that I have started to really look at. Like, is this somebody that I would want to go to brunch with? Is this somebody that I would actually want to hang out with and wouldn't be like, extremely annoyed by? And it's just, are these people that feel authentic, that feel real, and that you think your audience is really going to connect with? All right, so you found some people that you like, and so now you need to start evaluating them. And I'll say a lot of gut goes into the influencer marketing job. You're looking for people that just feel right for your brand, and a lot of that is just, a gut feeling that this person feels like someone that your audience would like. But the most important part of this entire process is vetting. And I'm sure you've all seen articles of, influencers getting in trouble. Logan Paul, for example, doing some ridiculous thing in the woods. I don't even remember what he did exactly, but they're constantly in the news for messing up, and that just makes your brand look terrible if they're people that you're currently working with or even have worked with in the past. So we go through just a crazy vetting criteria every single time that we decide to partner with an influencer. And the first thing I look at is this influencer worth the money? I do that by finding their CPM. I usually just base it on feed posts versus stories because that's easier. But I basically create a list, and I see what the CPM is for every influencer in the campaign, and I start to compare them against each other. And so I start to see, are these people expensive? Are they really cheap? Why is that? Some people are really expensive because they have a unique proposition. Maybe their engagement is super high. Maybe there's someone that, there aren't a lot of other people like them out there. And those are the types of people that I think it's worth spending the money on. The influencer marketing space is all over the place in terms of pricing. Yes?
Can you please define CPM?
Yes. CPM is basically cost per 1,000 followers. So it's normally cost per 1,000 impressions. And what I view it as in this context is how much it costs per 1,000 followers that they have. And it honestly doesn't even need to be CPM. You can just divide their following by their cost, and I just use it to compare numbers basically. And so are they unique? Is there something about them that is special that I would want to pay extra money for? And then, there's also the inverse of this person is super cheap. Why? Sometimes you just get really lucky and they don't have a lot of experience in this field, and you're just going to get a lot of stuff for your money. But other times it's other things like, did they buy followers? Do they have really bad engagement? Are they doing literally every other post on their feed as a sponsored post? And so it just kind of comes down to you looking at their content and seeing if you feel like they are worth the cost or not. Another thing that we vet for is, does their feed or content look good for the brand? So does their color scheme match the brand? Are they going to be creating content that you can reuse? Do they do a ton of sponsored content? That has become one of the biggest red flags for me. I do not want to work with somebody that's working with a different brand every other day, because that's somebody that's going to just start to lose followers really fast. No one wants to see only sponsored content in their feed, even if we're the ones that are contributing to it. Would they feel or look authentic using this product? So there's some brands that it's just hard to even, look authentic, and that's the time that you just need to get creative. How can they be using this in their daily routine and not just be, holding up some random product and smiling, because that's not going to do a whole lot for you. And then do they work with other competing brands? Generally, when we work with influencers, we talk about exclusivity, so they cannot be working with any competing brands during the term of our contract. And different brands are going to have different rules on this. I personally think that with certain products, posting about other brands that are similar to you isn't necessarily a bad thing. You obviously just don't want them saying, I love Corona, when they're currently working with Heineken. But I think, so for this campaign, for example, we're doing a Heineken campaign, and our influencers are out at a brewery. It's a craft brewery. They're drinking a beer out of a pint glass. I personally don't think that's a bad thing. It just shows that they like beer. And so I would rather have them out at a brewery drinking a beer than, having them on their feed saying, I hate beer, I only drink wine. So I think you just have to talk with the brand and see what their goals are. And then, are they a risk to the brand? Are they overly political? Sometimes that's fine, sometimes it's not. Brands have different risk assessments, and maybe you're a political brand, then that's totally fine. You can work with people that are political. But sometimes that is definitely not the case. In that case, you need to go through years of these people's social content to make sure that they aren't saying anything that doesn't align with your brand values. Do they seem unhinged? And that's just a gut thing. Like, are they going to do something crazy? Are they going to say something crazy? And I generally like to work with people that I look at their feed and I immediately say, like, you are not going to mess up. You are not going to say something ridiculous. And there's a lot of influencers that do that well. And then there's some that, are literally every post is something crazy and political, and those are people that I might work with, but I'm gonna, vet a little bit further first. Are they really green? This is something that can both work to your advantage and not work to your advantage. So somebody has, a relatively new following, they haven't done a whole lot of brand partnerships, they're probably going to be less professional. They might not know what they're doing, but they're probably going to be cheap. So, are you willing to work with them a little bit more, making sure that what they create is really on brand? Or are you, do you not want to deal with that right now? Do you have a lot of other stuff going on? And that's just something you need to decide. And then you also just need to look into additional brand flags. So, for example, if you're working on a beer, you can't have anyone that's under 21. That's pretty obvious. But then there's other things like, brand guidelines where X% of their following needs to be over 25. And so that's just stuff that you need to get from the brand from a legal perspective. And then I talked about this a little bit earlier, but do they seem like a nice, decent human being that I wouldn't hate hanging out with? I recently finished up a campaign. I worked with our media guy to do a bunch of metrics. It was fascinating. The people who were easy to work with were professional. Their content just literally went like this to people that were not easy to work with. And I think it's just because influencers that have a little bit more experience in this and actually care about their brand, that actually care about their business, they're just easier to work with in general, and they're going to be nice to you. They're just going to create content that ends up performing a lot better than others. All right, so you have found an influencer. We vet all platforms. Oh, yeah. Oh, she asked if we're vetting not only the platform we're performing on or we're putting stuff on, but also their other platforms as well. Yes, so we vet basically 2 or 3 years back on every platform that they have online. So usually it doesn't really matter, but Twitter's the one that gets a little dicey sometimes. And so we generally just, create vetting documents. We vet all of them back between like 2 and 10 years. If it's a really big celebrity partnership, we go back as far as we possibly can. If it's an influencer partnership that we're going to be working with once, we'll probably go back, 2 years or so. But yes, we vet basically everything that we possibly can. Twitter is not only, it not only can be dicey, but it's also a really good way to see if there's any flags that you need to catch. Okay, so you are. Oh yes, sorry.
Really quick question. Can you give your opinion or experience on using your own employees as an influencer versus looking externally at managing specific images? So they kind of check the boxes that an external person would.
I have to say that I don't have experience using internal employees as influencers. I know that it happens sometimes. I think that's potentially great because they're people that work on the brand and understand it. I think you would just want to disclose not only that it's an ad, but also that they work there, just so it's, very clear. Yes.
That kind of brings up a question to me. A question that I had was, what defines an influencer? What do you do as far as vetting, finding out why are these people influencers, and where does somebody go to find? Is there a big book of influencers somewhere that you look for, or what's the process of defining? Is this person really an influencer?
That is a good question. Literally anyone can be an influencer. I honestly have tended, especially in the last few months, to start even moving away from traditional influencers and trying to find people who maybe don't even fit that mold. So somebody in Minneapolis, for example, like Gavin Kaysen, he could be a very interesting food influencer, and he's not someone who's a traditional influencer, but he's influential to a lot of people. In terms of finding them, it's just a lot of Googling and like searching Twitter, looking at hashtags. In terms of a big book, the Creator IQ is the closest thing we have. There's 3 million influencers on it. It's hard to like search all of them, but they just pull people in based on following. So it's.
How does one get on that list?
We can personally add them, but I actually don't know how they pull people in. That's a really good question. But I think basically if people have a couple thousand followers, they're just added somehow by the company. And then if we find someone that we are interested in working with, we can add them too, and it will just pull all their metrics in and all of that kind of stuff. Xfinity, leave me alone. Okay. So once you find her, oh yes.
I was just going to add to that, as far as like a book of influencers, there are several platforms that you can use, and there's different price ranges of those platforms. Yeah. Social Blade is a good free one to just get some basic metrics and kind of like how iffy is this person. But there are a lot of really great platforms that you can use that set up campaigns for you and help you vet influencers. And yeah, you're so right about the following count. It could be like 1,000 to like 100,000 or 10 million.
Yeah, totally. There's things, there's a platform called Isaiah I know that people really like. We use Creator IQ. What was the one you just said? Maverick. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. This industry is really kind of exploding, and there's all of these different platforms that track campaigns now. I went through a process of trying to figure out which one we were going to use, and I ended up with a spreadsheet that was like this big. It was just like, there's so many things right now and they all do different things, but it's basically just finding one that works best for your company. It would be amazing if there was just one that everyone sort of agreed on using, because influencers right now are not too keen to connect their social accounts to all of these different types of things. So reporting has become kind of a mess, but you basically just have to find what works for you. I will also say, in terms of influencer levels, I see basically anyone that has under 10 to 30,000 followers, I sort of view them as a micro influencer now. Anyone over 30,000 I see as like a mid-tier, which, I mean, this is a huge range. I would say anything from 30,000 up to like a 500,000 number is going to be a mid-tier. And then once you start getting over 500,000, you're going to start getting less people, and those are sort of what I see as more top tier. But you can talk to 100 people and they'll tell you 100 different things. So take that with a grain of salt. So when it comes time to reach out to influencers, I try my best to do these three things. Start being nice. You can even suck up to them a little bit if you want to. It could make them give you a better deal. Be brief. I don't like to share brand details until I know interest. So, for example, on a beer campaign, I would say, hey, I work for a national beer brand. Would you be interested in potentially partnering? If so, I can share more details. Somebody may not drink. I would hope I knew that beforehand, but they're going to say no, which is great, and then I don't need to share too many details with them. And so gauge their interest, and then you can sort of reach out, get into the details, share the campaign message, and start to work up contracts once you've negotiated with them. I'll just talk about negotiating for a second before we get into the contract. There is no real way or like perfect way to do this now. I would say about half of influencers have a media kit that they'll share with you that says their rates. The other half of them just email you and are like, I usually cost $2,000 a post. And then you basically have to go back to them and say, okay, if I bundle this package, would you, take a cut and maybe, do 4 posts for $4,000 or something like that. And some of them say yes, and then some of them hardball you for, a ton of time back and forth. So you basically just have to, like I said before, compare CPMs, see what's worth it, and then if they're coming in outrageously high, just tell them that and see if you can work out a deal. So then you get into contracting. This is legal's deal. I don't pretend to know exactly everything about it, and reading contracts makes me want to die. But contracts should include exclusivity information, so you can't post about another beer brand for this long. Boosting whitelisting capabilities. Try to get these if at all possible. You want to be able to put paid behind your content if it's available, and you want to be able to just use that content no matter, if you're using it for brand channels, if you're using it for marketing materials. Using your content is important. FTC guidelines, I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then just reviewing approval details. Do not ever let an influencer post without you reviewing. You would be shocked at how many influencers think that they can just create content and post it without you looking at it. It still happens to me. I will tell them clearly in the brief that we need to review it, and then I am looking through my Instagram feed and my post is live without me ever seeing it, which is very fun. And then any other legal stuff that your brand uses. If you're working for a big company, they usually will have their own contract, but we have a lawyer in-house that drafts up all of this kind of stuff. But I mean, if you're, a smaller shop, I'm sure that, most of these influencers, they're pretty easy when it comes to contracting. And so just, getting written documentation is important of, what they're giving you, how much you're going to spend, and all of that stuff. So after the contract is signed, you need to brief the influencer. And so it's really not that simple. And this is what I'll say. This never happens, and I wish it happened more, but just like with the way that brand campaigns work, it's very hard to do this. But if you can bring an influencer in before the campaign is fully cooked, that is amazing. Your partnership is going to make so much more sense. They'll be able to be a part of it. If they're an influencer that has a lot of experience, they might be able to add to your campaign in a way that you might not even have thought of. But if that is not the case, then you just need to share a brief with them, sharing, an overview of the campaign, campaign details. So, this is the types of posts we want you to create. We want you to do 2 Instagram posts, 2 Facebook posts, and this is when we want you to post them. I like to include example images, so I usually pull a couple photos from their feed that I feel represent what we're looking for. That's just an easy way for them to look at a brief and see, okay, they want a post of me eating this product versus just a photo of a flat lay sitting on my kitchen table. And one thing I've learned recently is posts do so much better when the influencer is actually in them. So if the influencer is actually sitting in the post, people are going to stop versus some just flat lay that just has product in it. It just becomes a lot more engaging. And then exclusivity information, you need to include that in there, as well as brand posting guidelines. So this is things like, it can get very granular. So say you're working on a yogurt. Do you want them putting toppings on the yogurt? Do you not want them putting toppings on the yogurt? Do you want to make sure that the expiration date is not on the front of the cup? It can get super, super granular, but that kind of stuff is just going to really prevent you from making people reshoot. And I mean, you have to get as specific as, please do not take a picture with a giant Nike logo on the front of you. Like, you want your brand to be front and center. You don't want other brands competing with your space. And FTC. I have no idea what the FTC looks like, but this is how I imagine it in my head. You need to disclose every single post that you're doing with FTC guidelines. It depends what your brand wants to use. I like to use #ad or the actual handshake tool when possible, but some brands are open to things like saying the brand _ambassador or #sponsored. And this needs to happen across posts and also stories. So our rule of thumb with stories is as long as you have the ad disclaimer on the first image, you should be covered. But it basically just depends on what risk your legal is looking to take on. And it's shocking to me how many brands still don't make their influencers disclose. It is illegal. You need to do it. And here's Chrissy saying that you should use ad or sponsored, and she knows what's up. Also know there is a 50-50 chance your influencer is going to read the brief. It is shocking to me how many people send me content and it is clear they had not read anything that I sent them. And that brings me to reviewing content. Yes?
We have a question. Can a child be an influencer for a product or service or a children's product?
Yes. It just depends on your brand and if they're okay with that. It kind of scares me a little bit because it gets into a space of consent and does the child actually know what they're doing in order to sell this product. That being said, if you look at mom bloggers, their kids are in basically every one of their posts, sponsored or not. So I think it's just a conversation you need to have internally and decide what is okay and what isn't. All right, so reviewing content, the number one thing I will say is listen to your partners. You do not want to start editing captions really heavily. I would really recommend talking to your partners to see what content does best on their channels, what types of things don't work. And I know some local influencer type people, and they just get so frustrated because brands really start to prescribe every single thing that they want from their posts. And while it's important to set guidelines, the influencer knows what's going to work best for them and what's going to perform best. And at the end of the day, you want content that does well, and the influencer is going to know that best. But you need to review everything. You would be shocked at how many influencer posts I get back with the brand name spelled wrong. Like, you would think that would be the easiest thing to do, but you need to make sure they spelled the brand name right. Did they use the correct handle or hashtag? Do they have the correct call to action? Are they using proper disclosures? Are there typos? Does this feel on brand? And so those are just some types of things you need to look for before you're approving anything. So you have now put the content out into the world, and so you have to start evaluating what's working and what's not. I love testing things, so trying new things, doing stuff you haven't done before. We're trying out a LinkedIn campaign, which I have never done before, but I'm very interested to see how it's going to work. And basically, as much as you can on the back end review what you did and see what worked well and what didn't, it's just going to make your campaigns better in the long run. I like to review engagement rate against their average engagement rate. So it's really hard to figure out what's doing well and what's not just by the number of impressions it gets. It's just a number. It doesn't really mean anything. But one really interesting way to look at how a post did is see what engagement rate was like versus what their average engagement rate is. Our tool gives us average engagement rate, which is really helpful. But you can even just look at their posts and see, okay, they usually get 200 comments, but our post got 250. And you also need to know that ad content is going to generally do worse than regular content. So if you're even at the same bar as what their general content is doing, that's a really awesome thing. Also, sharing follower feedback can be an extremely great tool for just showing how good your campaign was doing. Basically, if you have followers commenting on your posts and they're saying, I went and tried this product, or they're posting pictures on their Instagram stories saying, thank you, influencer, I'm so excited I got to try that. That means your posts are actually converting people to purchase, which is a really, really awesome thing. And Instagram stories makes this so hard because most of the time you don't even see what's happening. So just having a good relationship with your partners and saying, hey, we want to continue working with you, anything that you can do to share results like this, even if it's just them screenshotting them and texting them to you. That's stuff that you can include in a recap that can be extremely valuable. And then I also like to set metrics against past campaigns. So if you've worked with a brand for more than 2 years or even 1 year, just compare results, see what's working, what's not, and hopefully you're going to be getting better over time. Yep.
Have you guys gone even farther and said, hey, influencer, we're also going to have some plant comments that'll be on the post as well? So paying for the comment on the influencer's post?
Paying for comments?
So you pay the influencer to do your post,
yep,
and then you're paying a different influencer to comment the way you want to on the post.
We have not done that. That can be tough too because they would need to be disclosing that as well, per FTC. I will talk about pods a little bit later, which is basically that. But in general, you want engagements to be authentic and not paid, and that's what I would say at least. Yes.
When you think about testing, are you thinking about strictly A/B testing, or are you thinking like test different things and have fun and try different things?
Both. Yeah. Yeah, she asked, for testing, do you mean A/B testing, or do you mean testing different platforms and that kind of stuff? So for a campaign we just wrapped up, we looked at did recipe posts perform better, did snack posts perform better, or did lifestyle posts perform better? The snacking posts by far were our most engaged with and highest impressions posts across the campaign. So now we know if we continue working with them, that's the type of post that we should over-index on. But it's also campaigns. Right now, influencer marketing is so focused on Instagram. I haven't paid for a Twitter post, an influencer for 2 years maybe. It's just, Twitter is just overrun with people screaming about politics, and so it's like, it's pretty worthless. If you even look at people with like millions of followers, they get like 2 likes on their tweets. And so unless you're putting paid behind something, I personally don't think Twitter is the place for it anymore. But trying things like LinkedIn is great. Or if you bundle things and you get an Instagram post, but say, hey, will you throw in a Facebook post too? I would not recommend paying for stuff that you don't really want, but if you can get it bundled just to see how it's working, that can be a really good way to go.
I have a kind of a add-on to talking about authentic engagement. So one of the things we get a lot with our influencers is they always want to do giveaways. And my thinking is you get a lot of people who just kind of jump on the bandwagon. They're not really interested in what they have to say about the brand, but they want to win product. What are kind of your thoughts about doing giveaways? Do you feel like they're successful, or do you feel like you just kind of get people just tagging and liking just because they want to win something?
Yeah, I mean, giveaways are hard because just from a legal perspective, it kind of becomes a disaster. We honestly don't do a lot of them, but I think if it's a new product and you're trying to get people excited about it, I think it can be fine and like a good way to definitely get engagement on a post and get people excited about something. But in general, we try to shy away from them just because it becomes a big legal thing where influencers need to like write their own rules, and then influencers need to fulfill the like giveaways themselves, and a lot of them don't even like to do that. So unless it's something exciting and something people are going to be really into, I just think it's not that worth it. And so when you're setting KPIs, please do not promise added value. I would not promise things that go above and beyond what you're contracting these people for. They are under no legal, issue or no legality to give it to you. So I don't think that's a good KPI to set. And then don't promise engagement. Engagement's a tough thing to track. You never know what your post is going to get, but I think, like I said before, benchmarking and engagement versus their other posts can be a better way to go with that. And then do not set metrics against traditional ad buys. The hardest thing in influencer marketing right now is that people start benchmarking things against what it costs to, put an ad buy out. And it's such a different thing. With influencer content, you're getting so much more than just an eyeball. You're getting free content. Well, not free, you're paying for it, but you're getting beautiful content that your brand can use over and over again. You're getting a sense of real people sharing your product that you're not getting from when you're just putting an ad out there. It's a completely different thing. And so just be careful when you're setting metrics, and even when you're talking about influencer in preliminary meetings, you need to share, what value they're getting from this just beyond the number of impressions they're getting. So reporting results, as I said, things are still tricky. It's really hard to show what you're getting for influencer marketing, especially if you don't have any data from the brand that, this drove X number of sales over the campaign or that kind of thing. But it's getting a little bit better. So check out impressions, engagement, definitely share that information, and then also compare CPM among partners. And so this to me is just data. It's not necessarily showing, this campaign did good, but it shows who in your campaign performed best and who in your campaign performed best and who it makes sense to continue working with. I like to flight my campaigns in at least 2 contracted parts so that I work with more people at the beginning and then I cut the people out that are not performing well or that are a nightmare to work with. It just makes our lives easier and your content is going to continue to get better. And you want to be putting your money behind the people that are, performing well and creating content you like. It's such a waste of money to, contract someone for a year and half of the content they're creating is completely worthless. Another really good metric is if you're doing sponsored blog posts, you can share the amount of time people spent on a page. We recently did a recipe where people were spending 8 minutes on the page just trying to do the recipe, and that's an average number. So, that's 8 minutes of people looking at your product and branding on a sponsored post. That is pretty crazy. And then look at comments, see what people are saying. Even if it's good or bad, it's just good to know, what people are thinking about the product. Is there something you can do to change? Is there something that you can do with content to make it resonate better? And are you seeing people saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to go try this? Because that's a really cool thing to add to a recap as well. If you don't have a tracking platform that pulls information in for you, just ask your influencers to screenshot their metrics that look like this. I don't like to just have them send an impression number because it tells me absolutely nothing. But with this type of metric, you can not only see reach and impressions, but you can also see things like sticker taps. So, for example, on this post by YQ by Yoplait, 46 people clicked on YQ by Yoplait to see how many, to see what the brand was. And that's a really cool metric to have because people are not only looking at the post, but they're actually engaging with it and going to the YQ by Yoplait page. Yes. You can. It just depends on what your product is. I know a lot of vacation places do that, and it's come stay with us and do 3 posts. But it's getting harder and harder. A lot of influencers get tons of free stuff, and so they don't really care if you're giving them something. But I'll say it happens a lot more with fashion brands, with travel brands, and that kind of thing. Some CPG stuff people will take, but in general, buying, a $2 granola bar isn't going to be that interesting to them. Also on this, you can see things like navigation. So this is her Instagram story. You can see this is how many people started. And so 127 people clicked back once they saw this story. 5,582 clicked forward. So what's cool to see with that is the vast majority of people who saw this first story also went to the second story, which means they aren't just swiping away. And so 629 out of 6,000 just swiped to the next story. And that's kind of a cool thing to see just because most of the people were engaged enough with the content that they just didn't go away from it. Is there anything else on there that's good? Yeah, replies. You can see how many people responded to that story through Instagram stories. And that's all stuff that you can't see otherwise. So make sure that you're getting this data. Find someone that's good at math. As marketers, most of us aren't. So I hate math. I hate spreadsheets. I barely know how to work Excel. But I got our lovely media guy who does love spreadsheets to help me. So we had kind of a crazy data session the other day. And on a past campaign looked at things like impressions and average post. And so we basically are able to track impressions versus CPM on posts. And so we're able to see, people who performed well versus people who performed not so well. And we were actually able to also look at things like correlations. So we found that there is a small inverse correlation between influencer reach and the size of and I believe their comments, or not their comments, their engagement. So basically the bigger the influencer gets, the smaller engagement gets, which is something that was not surprising to me whatsoever. People feel a lot more connected to smaller influencers. They think they're their friends. They're, people that they can actually relate to versus someone with millions of followers who, almost seems more like a celebrity to them. Basically, it just depends on what you're looking for, but I like to mix big influencers with smaller influencers just because I tend to get better engagement with those, more cued-in audiences.
Hi. What's a good average CPM? Or is that specific to category and influencer
It's
reach?
like all over the place. It can be anything from $2 to $75. And, it depends on the platform. It depends on the story. It's generally quite a bit higher than an average media buy just because you're getting so much more than just, an eyeball. But the last campaign I had, the best was $2 and the worst was like $250. So sorry, that was not an answer, but... Yes.
Hi, just more questions for me. When you talked about content usage, is that something you're spelling out in the contracts, or is it just assumed that we paid you to create this, we can use it indefinitely?
No, that's in the contract always, and sometimes you have to negotiate it. Most people don't charge extra for you to use the content, but they do charge extra for you to whitelist it because they think that if you're putting paid behind their accounts, it looks inauthentic. But I think it's worth it. I try to negotiate it down as much as possible, but I think you should be getting everything you possibly can from your content, so include all of that in your contract. And sometimes they're just like, yeah, whatever, do whatever you want with it, and sometimes they're like, I need to know exactly where you're going to use this, and then you need to get a little bit more granular. Okay, so this is an example of our platform we use, and it lets you just plug in creators, and it's a really nice way to just put stuff out into the world in a pretty fashion, and you can actually click on the numbers and it will take you right to their profile. But you can use just regular spreadsheets for sharing creators as well. And then this also allows us to see, as I was talking about earlier, things like average engagement rate, by platform, total followers, average likes per image, average comments per image. So that's really useful when you're, benchmarking and trying to figure out what you should be expecting from your campaign. For some reason, our tool says that everyone's engagement rate is bad. I literally have never seen anyone's that's even the top of mainstream, so take that with a grain of salt. But and then we can also see, they give us social media value, engagement rate, all of that kind of stuff. That social media value seems fake to me, so I would also ignore that. But you should, that's the thing is, you get a lot of information and you have to really test yourself to feel or see what actually feels right and real. All right, so we will talk about using content. Please reuse your content. It is a waste of money to, have a piece of content sit on a influencer's channel for one day and then, it basically is never used again. These people have spent, a lot of time actually creating really beautiful branded content. And if you're finding the right influencers, it should feel on brand. And so it's a free way to get social content. It's a free way to get, content you can use on your blog or recipes that you can put on your website. And so as much as you can, reuse your content and get the most value you can out of it. So you can use it for paid social, you can use it for brand content, and then you can use it for content and media materials, and whatever else you want. I'll talk really briefly about influencer events. We do quite a few of these, and they can be expensive, but they can really help you form relationships. And they also work best when you have relationships. So it's a great way to get added value, which is basically just, it's a great way to get free content from influencers if you can convince them to go to the event. It can be expensive, and it's best if used in a scalable basis. So I would recommend, if you're doing an influencer event, try to do a few and be reusing your stuff, just so that you're getting the most out of your money. And it can also be a great way to build brand content. This is an event we did for We by YoPlay a few years ago, and it was beautiful. We had all of these influencers. We basically had an influencer we were working with invite her influencer friends. This was in Salt Lake City, and if you guys didn't know, basically all of Salt Lake City is influencers. It's like where all of them live. It's really weird. But all of these beautiful people came to this brunch and were posting about it. So we did 4 of these in different cities, and we just made them super beautiful, super Instagrammable, and we got just crazy posts. So we got all of these posts from people completely free. I mean, not free because we paid for the event, but these were all posts that we got from people who attended the events that we did not pay for. And that's, awesome branded content. And this product was just launching. It is one of my favorite launches I've ever done. I still get warm and fuzzy feelings whenever I see these pictures. But we just had awesome engagement. We had Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter came to our event, which was very exciting, and I'm now 1 degree away from Chris Pratt. So yeah, it was really fun. They were beautiful. The biggest thing with influencer events is you need to make sure that they have all kinds of opportunities to be sharing. Make sure your product makes sense for the events. This worked awesome because we had these beautiful little jars where we could fill them with flowers everywhere, and everywhere we turned there was a branded piece that people would be taking pictures of. But I will say influencer events are becoming very, very common, and it's becoming harder and harder to actually get influencers to them unless you're paying them. So you just have to make sure that it's something creative and special and something that people are going to actually want to attend and not just roll their eyes at.
Excuse me, I had a question on that last one. How do you approach discussing return on the investment in an event with your clients? So influencer events can be pretty pricey to pull it all together, effort, materials. How do you talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. We can, share things like CPM and cost on investment. We just did some events. I mean, it's basically the same way that you have to talk about experiential. It's not only getting people to try the product, but it's also creating content for you. It's getting, added value influencer posts. I like to do it in coordination with another an actual influencer program. So it's almost like the earned arm of your influencer program, where you're paying all these people, you're getting all of this content that you know exactly what it's going to be, and it's, promised to you. But this is another chance within that program to get some content that you might not be paying for, and that you can, get some additional branded photos and things out of. And just make sure you have pretty photographers there so you can share lovely photos like this for years to come. All right, so another way to reach influencers is through influencer kits, which I'm sure you have all seen if you're clicking through. How am I doing on time? If you're clicking through Instagram, you see all kinds of people unboxing all kinds of stuff. A lot of times it's makeup or clothes, but you can do this with any sort of product. make them as beautiful as you can, and they're happening more and more now, so you need to find ways to personalize them. If you look at Chrissy Teigen and Kim Kardashian and even like someone like Something Navy, who are huge influencers, they still open stuff for free on their Instagram, but it needs to be special and personalized. So that could be anything from writing a handwritten note to them about why you're sending them this, to creating like a crazy produced kit that has their name on the top of it or has their daughter's name on the top of it. But it needs to have some sort of value that you're going to look at it and you're going to say, wow, and you're going to want to share it. They can be expensive, especially when you're shipping stuff that needs to be refrigerated. So, I mean, an influencer kit can cost anything from, $50 to $400, and if you need to ship stuff overnight, it's like $100 just to ship something overnight. And you just have to basically do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth it for you to be getting this content, or would you rather put your money into a paid program? Also, FTC guidelines are still a little fuzzy on this. You can't really force someone to use #ad when you don't have a contract with them and you're just sending them something. Right now, what we do is to include on all cards that they, please include #ad, but it's kind of up to them to do what they want to do. So you just have to work with, legal to figure out if you guys are okay with that. Okay, I'm almost done. A few random notes. Long-term relationships are better and create real relationships. If you do a program with, 5 influencers and you do 1 post each, you're not going to get any added value out of that. I just finished a campaign where we worked with 20 people over the course of 9 months. We got 80% added value. So 80% of the posts that we got from our program were completely unpaid. And that's just working with people who love the brand, who you have a close relationship with, and who feels very deeply about sharing this product. And part of that was we got rid of half of our influencers halfway through and only kept the ones that were doing really well and that really liked the brand and were posting all the time. So we got all of this free content from them just because they liked the brand enough. Instagram stories have terrible impressions. A lot of people think that Instagram stories are where it's at right now, but they reach it's something like 2% of people's audiences versus 20%. So I think they can still work really well. They're a really good way for you to drive people to a feed post. So, check out my new post. And they're also a really good way to, post authentic content. That's where people are posting their real life. And so if your brand feels like that's a better fit for them, it's a good place to do that. But I would always get a feed post as well. And I try not to even pay for stories if I don't have to. I try to bundle them in with feed posts and say, okay, if I pay you for 3 feed posts, then you'll give me stories to go along with each post as well. Pods are a thing, and this gets back to your question about having other influencers posts. How many of you know what pods are? Okay. So pods are basically groups of influencers who basically comment and like on each other's posts. So you have a pod of influencers. It could be 100 influencers. It could be 20 influencers. And they're basically posting on each other's posts like, yay, I like that, cute. And they're just nonsensical things that don't actually mean anything. And so they're in this group, and in order to stay in the group, they have to like and comment on every post that somebody puts in the group. And so that's why a lot of times you need to really be careful when you're looking at engagement, because half of them could be fake. It just depends on if the influencer's in a pod or not. You can usually tell because you start to look at the comments and it's like SF Girl by Bay, just like a bunch of ridiculous blogger names that usually they're not as professional, but it's just a whole bunch of blogger handles, and then it says like one word or cute or like stuff that doesn't make any sense. And so that's just something to keep in mind when you're reporting engagement as well. And sorry for the guys in here, but there is a wonderful Facebook group called Women in Influencer Marketing, and I suggest you all join it. It's just a really great community where people share tips, tricks, where you can say, I'm looking for this kind of influencer, does anyone have any ideas? And you get all kinds of help, and you can kind of talk to other people in this industry. And I have no affiliation with them, I just really like it. Who's excited for Taylor Swift tomorrow? No one? Okay. Okay, questions?
Do you mind?
Yeah. I'll just walk around.
Hi. So I have a question on authenticity, right? I think that's a big problem right now in influencer marketing is clients are trying to control every piece of a post from like literally I've seen influencers copy and paste emails into their captions. And for me, the most viral campaigns I've had are when I've sat back and be like, you guys do you, because that's what you're here for. And I know we use the word influencer, but they're artists, they're creators, they're making content. So how do you control that expectation with a client from making sure these posts stay as authentic as possible without trying to make it too marketing focused?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it just comes from like a very clear understanding from the very second that you sign onto this campaign. If it's somebody that's worked with influencer a lot before, they're usually pretty good about it. But you need to basically say from the very beginning, this is what needs to be done in order for this campaign to perform well. If you want to get your messaging in there, fine, but it's just not going to do as well as it would have otherwise. And I totally agree, like, you have to let the influencers, create whatever content that that feels authentic to them within your brand reason. So I usually, I'll edit captions quite a bit, but I'll say, we need something more along the lines of this. Feel free to put it in your own words as long as the sentiment remains. And so that's one way to kind of get around it if they're not using the messaging that you want.
I think we have time for one more question. Where are you pointing to? Oh.
Can you share a little more about what you're doing on LinkedIn and how you view that differently than what you're doing in other, like on Instagram and things?
Yes, I literally did this yesterday for the first time, so I can't really share a whole lot. There's not that many people with very big followings on LinkedIn is what I found, so I don't know how it's going to go yet, but I'll be very interested to see how it works out, so sorry.
Let's give Maggie a round of applause. Thank you very much. She will be here if you have further questions, and you can hit her up online. Thank you very much for coming. I hope we'll see you next month. Have a great rest of the day. I am so sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Thanks everybody for watching. Come see us next month on Social Media Breakfast on Thursday. Follow Skelly Video Production so you can see everything on here live and let us know any questions. Cheers. Microphone.